Are you passionate about foreign policy, national security, and the latest in domestic politics? Consider becoming a member of the DSR Network, your go-to source for in-depth analysis and insightful discussions. With the DSR Network podcasts, stay ahead of the curve on global affairs. Each episode features top experts, policymakers, and thought leaders who break down complex issues into digestible, engaging conversations. From breaking news to historical context, we cover the topics that matter most. Whether it's the intricacies of international diplomacy, the latest in national security strategies, or the dynamics of U.S. politics, the DSR Network has you covered. Members receive an ad-free listening experience, bonus content for virtually all of our shows, an invitation to join the DSR Slack community, enhanced show notes for select podcasts, and much more. Visit thedsrnetwork.com/buy and enter code GRADUATE to receive 30% off the regular membership price for the first year or first month. That's thedsrnetwork.com/buy and code GRADUATE. Thank you very much for your support.
This is the Daily Blast from the New Republic, produced and presented by the DSR Network. I'm your host, Greg Sargent. In the wake of Donald Trump's criminal conviction, House Republicans are ramping up their efforts to use the legislative process to try to shield him from other ongoing criminal prosecutions. These efforts are taking many forms, and they all seem to have the support of Speaker Mike Johnson, which actually gives Democrats an opening to go on offense against the GOP by hammering Republicans for aiding and abetting Trump's nonstop quest to place himself above accountability in the law. Yet some Dems seem reluctant to engage this fight directly. One Democrat who is not reluctant to take on this battle is California Congressman Eric Swalwell. So we invited him on the show to talk about how Dems can go hard at Johnson's efforts to protect Trump. Welcome, Congressman. Good to have you here.
Hey, thanks, Greg. Nice to be with you.
Okay, so Mike Johnson and House Republicans are promising several new things in defense of Trump. One is that GOP leaders are whipping votes in support of a bill that would allow presidents, including former ones, hint, hint, to move state-level charges against them to federal courts. That's apparently a direct response to Trump's conviction in Manhattan. Another thing they're promising is House Republicans are preparing to vote to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt for refusing to turn over audio of President Biden being questioned by special counsel Robert Hur. Let's take these in order. Your response to the first of those?
It shows entirely who MAGA Republicans will fight for. They will fight every day for Donald Trump. Democrats from Joe Biden to the Congress will fight for you. And we need to make that clear, because if it's just red team versus blue team or Trump versus Biden, it gets lost in politics. But that's the cost of what these folks are doing. So, it's also the cost of Donald Trump, right? His presidency will not be a presidency about you. It's going to be a me presidency. He's going to spend all of his time, all of his resources carrying out a revenge tour, and that's not going to help your kids be safer in their classroom from gun violence. That's not going to bring down the cost of your prescription drugs. That's not going to bring more transparency, to your healthcare costs. That's not going to, stop corporations from gouging you at the grocery store. It's not going to do any of that. I also think, just to build it out a little bit more, Greg, we need to talk about how compromised Donald Trump is because of this verdict. A jury decided, and by the way, the number's not, 34, it's 408, because 12 jurors 34 times said 408 straight times guilty. They decided that Donald Trump was willing to spend money to silence somebody who had information that was damaging about him. So a president who is so willing to just be compromised like that, and who is now in an acute financial distress, is not going to put your priorities first. And so, again, he's going to fight every day for himself and not you, and he's severely compromised. That's how we, I think, go on offense and make people care about it.
Let's talk about these things that House Republicans are promising to do. What's your response to the first of these, which is that they're whipping votes in support of a bill that would allow presidents to move, including former presidents, to move state-level charges against them to federal courts?
It's absurd. It's the Republicans acting as a law firm, with just one client in mind. That's Donald Trump. And again, the President Joe Biden, is trying to do his job, is trying to get, members of Congress to focus on issues at the border. And again, they're so distracted that their priorities are Donald Trump's legal troubles and changing the law to adopt it and accommodate Donald Trump's legal troubles. That doesn't help people who are just wondering, what the hell are you guys doing to help me? And then second, you asked about, holding Merrick Garland in contempt. Again, we like to see ourselves as a country where no matter who you are, whether you're rich or poor, you're treated exactly the same. And they're going after Merrick Garland because they think that Donald Trump should be better treated than you would be if you ever, God forbid, were before the criminal justice system.
I mean, on the substance of it, the attack on Garland seems absurd. They're holding him in contempt of Congress for not turning over audio of Biden. I mean, this is a joke. Special counsel Robert Hur, of course, put into his report those asides about Biden showing his age. So it's obvious Republicans just want this audio to use as a political weapon. I mean, anyone can just read the transcript of Biden's testimony. Can I ask, Congressman, how do you see this one playing out in particular? There is going to be a vote. What's going to happen, do you think?
Yeah, so and first and foremost, the case is closed and no charges have been filed against President Biden. Not the same as Donald Trump, who has been charged with mishandling national security secrets. Second, Hur testified that Biden had photographic recall. And what's interesting and why I think playing out this exercise of getting the audio and then getting a video and then making him, do a lie detector test, they'll never be satisfied. But Hur was willing to mischaracterize Biden's responses in his memo. And only once the transcript was released, and it was during my exchange with him, did he acknowledge that Hur himself told Biden that he found his memory to be photographic. So I don't think we need to play any further games with the case that's been closed. And, oh, by the way, someone else in that committee hearing room where Garland testified last week, who's also protected by Garland's policy, is Matt Gaetz, because the House Ethics Committee wants information about Matt Gaetz's closed sexual trafficking investigation. And Garland is saying, no, we're not going to do it. The case is closed. So it protects Gaetz. It protects Biden. You probably wouldn't expect to hear those two in the same sentence. But the overriding principle here is to have an equal application of the rule of law. And that's exactly what Garland's doing.
What's fascinating, too, on the politics of this is that Republican incumbents in tough races are reluctant to vote on both of these initiatives. Shockingly, it turns out corruptly siding with a convicted felon who faces multiple other criminal trials might be a liability in swing districts. Yet I gotta say, Congressman, it seems like some Dems have been a bit reluctant to take this on. Not you. You had that video calling out Republicans for being in a Trump cult, which went viral, which I think suggests there's a large audience out there that wants to see Dems go on offense on this. I mean, when Republicans in tough districts balk at voting for efforts to shield Trump, doesn't that suggest Dems have an opening to really drive a wedge here by, putting Republicans on the spot for using the legislative process to put their felon nominee above the law?
A felon nominee, who is connected to, a felon team, right? If you go back and who was on his team, who is now a felon or is indicted under felony counts and will be on his team, that's exactly what you're going to get. And the cult reference is to point out that these are extremists who are supporting Trump in Congress and on his campaign team. And they're the ones who are going to be in charge of making decisions about what you care about. And I think, we never want it to just be red team versus blue team. We want to make sure people understand that when extremists who are demonstrating cult-like behavior, all, in support and worship of one individual, Donald Trump, chances are they're not going to make your priorities their priorities. And that's where Democrats, I think, have to make the point that they're extreme, but really pivot to who they are fighting for, Republicans, and who we will continue to fight for. And I think it's that second point that will really land with the voters in what's going to be an extremely close election decided by about 10,000 votes or so in 6 or 7 different states across the country.
I do think there's a way to go on offense on this, though. Let me run this by you. Some House Democratic candidates are going hard at GOP incumbents over this stuff. I'm just going to name a few here. George Whitesides, who's challenging GOP Rep Mike Garcia, has hit Garcia for having no concerns about Trump's felony convictions. Missy Cotter Smazel, who's challenging Republican Jen Kiggins in Virginia, has slammed her authoritarian support for Trump. Ashley Ehas, who's running against Rep. Brian Fitzpatrick, a Republican, has promised a steady drumbeat of reminding voters about Trump's conviction. I want to throw this out here. I think Dems should introduce a new category called rule of law Democrats. That is, Dems who are willing to campaign forcefully against Trump's criminality. What do you think?
Yeah, I like that, Greg. And again, going back, taking it, as I said, that second point, because yes, he's a felony convict, jury convicted felon. That's who we're dealing with here. But the real point is to, like, why do I care? You know, I'm working at an auto repair shop in Cleveland. Like, why do I care about this? It's that Donald Trump is seeking, with his 34 felony convictions, to be treated better than you would be. He will have access to a security clearance that no one else in the country would get if they had a felony conviction. He would preside over our military, which no one in the military would be able to do, to be in the military, let alone preside over it, if they had a felony conviction. And again, he would have the highest job in the land, and most Americans with a felony arrest, not even a conviction, would not be able to do that. So again, he's seeking to be treated better than you are, and that's where it's really going to make a difference, I think, for people when they see that Donald Trump thinks that he's better than you, he should be treated differently, and that's how you bring it back to the everyday voter.
I think there's also an opening to go after the Republican Party for aiding and abetting this behavior, right? I mean, let's just run through some things that Mike Johnson has said recently. He attacked the verdict against Trump as quasi-illegitimate. He absurdly suggested that national Democrats are manipulating the state prosecution of Trump. He's insisted the American people broadly reject Trump's convictions, which is false. Majorities agree with them. To your point about making voters care about the fact that Donald Trump thinks of himself as having access to a special set of rules that everyone else does not have access to, the Republican Party is trying to make that a reality and create that reality, no?
Yes. And by the way, they back the blue until they have to back the coup, right? They're the party of law and order, the party of the police, until the police raid their nominees' home to take national security documents out. And that's why being on offense as Democrats for the next 5 months is so important, because there is no consistency to their principles other than the worship and support of Donald Trump at the expense of anything you care about in your life. And that is a winning message because they see it as all Republicans care about is politics, and Democrats have to show that the cost of that is that there's no win for you, the voter.
I want to bring up one other thing House Republicans are doing on Trump's behalf. Your friend, Judiciary Chair Jim Jordan, is circulating proposals to go after the Justice Department, and a few of them would restrict funds going to any special counsels prosecuting a current or former president, again, all about Trump, or restrict funds for such prosecutions in other ways. It's still unclear how far they'll really push this one, but it is being circulated in black and white. What do you expect? Do you expect them to really go for this one?
Well, their problem with special, counsel investigations is that the the Donald Trump appointed special counsels have not been as corrupt as the Republicans would like them to be. If you recall, John Durham was appointed by Donald Trump to go on that, wild goose chase, trying to find all the wild allegations Trump had made about the Russia investigation. Durham found nothing. It was Robert Hur, appointed by Donald Trump to be a U.S. attorney in Baltimore, and then kept by reappointed by Merrick Garland to investigate the mishandling of classified information investigation against President Biden, and said there was nothing there. And of course, it is David Weiss, who was appointed by Donald Trump in Delaware and kept on by Merrick Garland to be the special counsel against Hunter Biden, and has not produced any charges that have come anywhere close to what's been alleged. So it's Donald Trump's, I guess, own incompetence in appointing corrupt special counsels that has Republicans pretty pissed off.
Yeah. Well, let's try to get at the bigger picture here, where all this is going in a broader sense. So what happens if and when these efforts to go after Garland, to constrain the prosecutions of Trump, defund them, whatever Republicans think they're doing, what happens if these efforts largely fizzle out? I mean, you've got Fox personalities raging openly at House Republicans for failing to produce evidence of non-existent crimes by President Biden. I've got to think that Trump and MAGA will demand that House Republicans keep up the efforts to shield Trump, which in turn isn't really so good for those vulnerable House Republicans who'll have to vote on this stuff. What happens then? What other efforts might they attempt? How do you see this playing out?
And oh, by the way, Greg, where the hell is the impeachment vote that we were promised against Joe Biden? You know, they very quietly 2 weeks ago, Comer and Jordan made criminal referrals of Hunter Biden and the president's brother, but have brought nothing, not even a criminal referral, not an impeachment vote against President Biden. And I think as Democrats, we have, and I've been doing this for the last couple of months in our hearings, we have to lean in and not only say you have delivered nothing, but to say that they have acquitted Joe Biden, that he's been acquitted of their charges. Because if we don't say it, they'll just leave that cloud hanging over there because they don't want to close that box out. They want to just leave it open. And so as a sword, they will, as a sword, they'll use their investigations to go after Biden, and then they'll use the power they have to try and shield Trump, going back to where we started, to try and make sure that no former president is essentially held, locally accountable for anything that they do. Here's where we are, though, a bigger picture. We've got about 5 months until November. Anything that Republicans do in the House will, of course, never have an audience in the Senate, and of course, would never be signed by this president. So we can buy 5 months, but voters have to ask themselves a question over the next 5 months, because that'll determine where the next 5 years go in this country, which is, first, do we even want a rule of law or not in our country? Do we want to be a democracy or not? And then they have to pick candidates. But they have to answer those two questions before they pick any candidates. And that's why it's so important, how we talk to voters about these issues and what they mean to them for the next 5 months.
Congressman Eric Swalwell, always good to talk to you. Thanks so much for coming on with us today.
Same here.
Folks, please check out some good content we've got for you up at TNR.com. Michael Tomasky arguing that Biden absolutely must run an aggressive 1936-style class warfare campaign against Trump's plans to cut taxes for the rich and corporations. And Alex Nazarian chronicling Donald Trump's history of scamming and asking whether right now we're witnessing his last effort at grift. We'll see you all tomorrow. You've been listening to The Daily Blast with me, your host, Greg Sargent. The Daily Blast is a New Republic podcast and is produced by Riley Fessler on the DSR Network.